Welcome. My name is Carol Dahl, and on behalf of ANDE's Executive Committee, I want to provide a warm welcome to all of you to ANDE's annual conference. Even though we are unable to meet in person this year, I thank you for joining us virtually. I'm confident that over the next few days together, we will deepen our knowledge, networks, and collective input to help shape the work for ANDE's members and especially strengthen support to the well over 100,000 small and growing businesses supported through our membership's work in the year to come. We also want to provide a special welcome to those of you who are participating in the conference for the first time. As both the outgoing chair of the ANDE Executive Committee as well as Executive Director of the Lemelson Foundation, which has been a longtime member and also supporter of ANDE, I am delighted to be joined today by Richenda Van Leeuwen, ANDE's new Executive Director. Richenda joined ANDE at the beginning of September following an extensive global search. Richenda has had a long and varied career, predominantly in the international development sector, including working on a range of aspects of support for both microenterprises as CEO of Trickle Up and for SGBs as an impact investor and foundation executive working with a range of nonprofits across Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Richenda has worked most recently leading engagement with a range of off-grid renewable energy companies and other providers, including having served as the U.S. Women's Clean Energy Ambassador to help bring energy access to more than 800 million people today, including many entrepreneurs who do not have electricity in their homes or their workplaces, and to help address climate change. So Richenda, I am thrilled to be here today and have the chance for us to have a little bit of a chat and to share some of your thoughts with the ANDE membership. Let me start by first asking you the obvious question, which is tell us a little bit about yourself, where you've come from, and what has interested you in ANDE's work.
Thanks very much, Carol, and let me just say how delighted I am to have joined ANDE and to come into this new role. I know it's been a challenging time for many organizations, and a lot of people will be quite happy to see 2020 behind us, but it's really a pleasure to be together with all of you, and particularly this year for the annual conference, for me to meet all of the membership and get to learn about your work, your stories, and to hear about your impact around the world. So let me just start by saying that it's a real pleasure to be together with you all. My background, as you said, has been quite eclectic. I joke that I'm a cat with 9 lives, but hope that this is life number 5 or 6, and certainly not yet number 9. But yes, I have worked for many years on various different parts of the international development spectrum, most recently particularly focusing on renewable energy and other climate-oriented solutions, which I think is particularly relevant to the new ANDE strategic area focused on environmental and climate action. So I'm very much looking forward to digging in there. I most recently worked with the Rocky Mountain Institute, where I was managing director for its clean energy work in emerging markets. And previous to that, have spent a long time, as you mentioned, focused specifically on supporting energy enterprises, many of which in fact are SGBs, some of which are ANDE members, many of which are not yet ANDE members, and really helping to structurally address the issue of energy poverty through looking at the ways that renewable energy can help to bridge that. And Lemelson, as you know, has been a long time supporter in that area as well. And before that as well, very much focused both on private equity, investing commercially for a period of time, as well as serving as a board member for several impact investment foundations, one of which on a interim basis was Argidius Foundation, which I know is also an ANDE member and longtime supporter, as well as Good Energies Foundation, both of which do provide a lot of support, both in the impact investing space, as well as directly working with a number of capacity building organizations within the broader SGB sector. So For me, I think before that, yes, I was also for almost 5 years CEO of Trickle Up earlier in my career. And I kind of feel that the Trickle Up work of micro enterprises sort of ends and the SGB work of ANDE begins in terms of the sort of the continuum of business development. But what really has been continuous throughout my career has been this idea of really looking at the nexus between business and social outcomes, and really looking at how you can support and stimulate sustainable solutions. And there is a place for aid, and certainly, you know, I've worked early in my career on refugee issues, which, you know, very much as a place for humanitarian action and aid, but really looking at how we can support and create very much more sustainable outcomes through taking more of a business lens to our interventions. And I think that's really where ANDE sits very well within the overall architecture, if you will, of the international development sector.
Well, that's great. Tell me, so what excites you most about this role?
Well, I think initially what excites me most is just getting to know all the great work that the ANDE members do individually and collectively. And even in my first week, I was doing a sort of a world tour, fortunately without the jet lag that normally comes with doing that, you know, through Zoom, because that's how we can engage right now. But really hearing the different challenges and opportunities, I think regionally, you know, our colleagues in Thailand and in Bangkok are not necessarily facing exactly the same challenges as our chapter members are in Central America. But there are some similarities, and there are some systemic issues that we still need to really focus on further advocacy for getting that systemic change and an increase in impact investment across the sector. So I'm really excited in digging deep into that, not only getting to know the members, but really also moving ahead on the themes that the membership has decided it really wants to have its priorities. I'm coming out of the world having been 6 years with the United Nations Foundation of living very much in the SDGs. So really seeing that the focus on 3 of the Sustainable Development Goals, decent work, gender equity, and environmental and climate action, you know, that is very much dear to my own personal focus. And that was one of the things that really resonated with me with ANDE in terms of where it's going over the next 10 years. And so I'm just really excited to get to know many of the members initially through this conference and other convenings, and work with you all together on really a great implementation strategy for how together as ANDE and as the sector as a whole, we can really get some great impact going, and building on really a very successful 10 years of ANDE's work together. Although I've not been a member of ANDE personally in the past, I do have to say that I've really watched ANDE grow from its beginnings in 2009, and have always admired and respected its work over the years. And so, you know, I think ANDE is not unknown to me, even as I get to know ANDE from the inside. So I just really welcome this opportunity.
Well, we're glad to have you here, that's for sure. So, you know, this year has just been really unprecedented, I think, in any of our lifetimes in terms of the challenges we've seen. And obviously that's affected the SGB community as well. I'm curious, what do you think are some of the key challenges you see for the SGB sector in the coming year, particularly in light of COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is the, you know, the most basic challenge with a lot of small businesses, which is a survival. And you know, I think different regions, different countries have taken different approaches. Sadly, I would say often haven't provided enough short-term stimulus support to really help to support the small business sector. And even here in the United States, you know, the SME sector writ large is about 90% of the economy. So if you're not supporting your SMEs, then, you know, as a whole, your economy is definitely going to suffer. So I think that is a challenge, and I was certainly seeing that in the energy sector in my last position, which is a lot of SGBs were very limited in terms of the operating capital that they had to keep going. So that's one area. On the plus side, though, I think there has been the opportunity for some businesses to pivot, and so, you know, some of them are able to pivot and begin to embrace new areas, and that's certainly something where I think there are some opportunities as well as the challenges of being forced to pivot, even if that wasn't initially part of your business plan. So I think that's certainly an area. Access to capital, access to markets. What are your markets? You know, those markets themselves are disrupted often at the moment in terms of customer base that you thought was really secure, and now that has either dried up completely or eroded, or again, you know, has had to be taken in a different direction. So I think some of the trends that were already there in the sector, we're probably going to see play out more. Things like digitization, you know, really looking much more at what can be delivered through online rather than in person, where you are disrupted in your ability to actually have those face-to-face interactions. So those are a couple of the areas. At the same time, of course, you know, we don't yet know how long COVID is going to be with us. But we do know that climate action is becoming increasingly urgent, and that's an area where I really look to focus on, even as we still address COVID, which is the next 10 years of making sure that the SGB sector is both well positioned to respond to the challenges from climate change, both in terms of what small businesses can do, but also in terms of how they need to respond themselves, whether that's in terms of reducing their own emissions, or, you know, taking on more renewable energy or energy efficiency, and then also looking at the goods and services that they provide in terms of building and transitioning to a green economy. And so those are some of the things that I'm thinking of immediately. All the while, of course, you know, we really need to focus on decent work and jobs. And I think that is going to be, for the next year, very much a focus on retaining employment, and then really looking at rebuilding and supporting SGBs as they sort of move through and work through the remaining challenges that we see coming with COVID. And of course, not to forget the third theme, which is gender, and that's going to be there all the way through.
Yeah, it's true. So perhaps you can say just a little bit. It's an early stage. You've been here 3 weeks in your new position.
One week.
One week as of our taping.
Yes.
And so at this early stage, you know, how do you see, what are some of the ways ANDE can continue to build and strengthen support for SGBs in the emerging markets?
I mean, I think there's so many ways. I mean, what I think one of the really strong suits of ANDE has been the research that it's been able to do, you know, the data. You know, the old adage is, you know, in God we trust, everybody else bring data. And I think ANDE has been very, very strong on really looking and building from a solid point of sort of looking at the metrics, looking at the impact, looking at the numbers, and helping to surface that in terms of where are the gaps, you know, where do we need to do better systemically, and then really working together with the ANDE membership individually, but also in the aggregate at some of the themes where we are stronger together as that ANDE membership. I mentioned advocacy, and that's a sort of a newer role for ANDE to be really embracing explicitly a stronger advocacy component. And that's one of the things that we're going to be building on with the support of the Lemelson Foundation. So thank you for that in the year to come, particularly as well. I do see that the convenings, you know, obviously this is a first for us, and you know, we really value the membership who has joined us into this sort of virtual world of virtual convenings. This is a first for us, you know, to be having the whole of the ANDE annual conference online. So we value your input, you know, as we go through these next several days, and what works well and what we can improve on in the future. We certainly hope that we are not required to host the full ANDE conference next year online as well, but you know, we will cross that bridge as we come to it in the coming months. But the convening function, I think, has always been a strength of ANDE. It's that ability to share knowledge, to share networks, and to interact both with the members who are delivering, you know, and working on the capacity building side, but also particularly as well with the impact investors, and helping to make sure that that voice of ANDE is well represented in that community as well. So those are just a couple of areas. I'm sure I'm going to pick up a lot through the conference and really build from there.
Well, 1 week in, I think that's a pretty good starting point. So, well, I know we're almost out of time, so I would like to thank you, Richenda, for, first of all, joining ANDE, but also for the opportunity to have the chance to chat today and to share a bit more about yourself with the ANDE membership here at the conference. I also want to thank those participants who are online listening to the chat today. I will just say personally, I am thrilled to have you on board, and I am excited about the new ideas and new vision that you're bringing on top of our very strong and robust strategy that ANDE emerged with out of its first 10 years. I am sure I speak for ANDE and all the ANDE members, as well as the conference participants, in saying that we wish you the very best in your new role and look forward to getting to know you better.
Thank you so much, Carol. It's a pleasure to be here.